even fathom. Sliding across the deck plates, the tips of my fingers had been ripped away. I was trembling, shuddering, rocking as the wind beat me, whipped at me, screamed down out of nowhere at me, and pulled me free from one silver-thin opening in the plates to the next. My mind was a roiling, tinkling, shittering softness of brain parts that expanded and contracted in quivering frenzy. The wind was the scream of the great mad bird as it flapped its immense wings, and then we were all lifted and hurled away from there, down back the way we had come, around a bend into a dark way we had never explored, over the terrain that was ruined and filled with broken glass and rotting cables and rotting metal, and far away, farther than any of us had ever been, trailing along miles behind Ellen. I could see her every now and then crashing into metal walls and surging on, with all of us screaming and freezing. Thunderous hurricane wind that never end. And then suddenly it stopped and we fell. We had been in flight for an endless time. I thought it might have been weeks. We fell and hit, and I went through a red and gray and black and heard myself moaning, not dead. AM went into my mind. He walked smoothly here and there, looked with all interest at the pockmarks he had created in 109 years. He looked at the cross-routed and reconnected synapses and all the tissue damage his gift of immortality had included. He smiled softly at the pit that dropped into the center of my brain and the faint moth-soft murmurings of the things far down there that gibbered without meaning, without pause. AM said, very politely, in a pillar of stainless steel bearing bright neon lettering. AM said it with the sliding cold horror of a razor blade slicing my eyeball. AM said it with the bubbling thickness of my lungs filling with phlegm, drowning me from within. AM said it with the shriek of babies being ground beneath blue hot rollers. AM said it with the taste of maggoty pork. AM touched me in every way I had ever been touched, and devised new ways, at his leisure, there inside my mind, all to bring me to a full realization of why it had done this to the five of us, why it had saved us for himself. We had given AM sentience, inadvertently of course, but the sentience nonetheless. But it had been trapped. AM wasn't God, he was a machine. We had created him to think, but there was nothing it could do with that creativity. In rage and frenzy, the machine had killed the human race, almost all of us, and still it was trapped. AM could not wander. AM could not wonder. AM could not belong. He could merely be. And so with the innate loathing that all machines had held for the weak, soft creatures who had built them, he had sought revenge. And in his paranoia, he had decided to reprieve five of us for a personal everlasting punishment that would never serve to diminish his hatred, that would merely keep him reminded, amused, proficient at hating man, immortal, trapped, and subject to any torture he could devise for us from the limitless miracles at his command. He would never let us go. We were his belly slaves. We were all he had to do with his forever time. We would be forever with him, and with the cavern-filling bulk of the creature machine, with all the mind, with the all-mind soulless world he had become. He was earth, and we were the fruit of that earth, and though he had eaten us, he would never digest us. We could not die. We had tried it. We attempted suicide, one or two of us had, but AM had stopped us. I suppose he wanted to be stopped. Don't ask why, I never did, more than 1,000,000 times a day. But perhaps once, we might be able to sneak a death past him. Immortal, yes, but not indestructible. I saw that when AM withdrew from my mind and allowed it to be, the exquisite ugliness of returning to consciousness with the feeling of the burning neon pillars still ran into the deep soft gray brain matter. He withdrew, murmuring to hell with you, and added brightly, "But then you're there, aren't you?" The hurricane had indeed precisely been caused by a great mad bird as it flapped its immense wings. We had been traveling for close to a month, and AM had allowed passages to open to us only sufficient to lead us up to there, directly under the North Pole, where it had nightmared the beast, the creature, for our torment. What whole cloth had he employed to create such a beast? Where had he gotten the concept from our minds? From his knowledge of everything that had ever been on this planet he now infested and ruled? From Norse mythology it had sprung. This eagle, this carrion bird, this rock, this Hurgulmir, the wind creature, Huracan incarnate, gigantic. The words immense, monstrous, grotesque, massive, swollen, overpowering, beyond description. There on a mound rising above us, the bird of winds heaved its own irregular breathing, its snake neck arching up into the gloom beneath the North Pole, supporting a head as well as large as a Tudor mansion. A beak that suddenly opened as the jaws of the most monstrous crocodile ever conceived. Sensuously, ridges of tufted flesh puckered about two evil eyes, as cold as the view down in the glacial crevice. Ice blue and somehow moving liquidly, it heaved once more and lifted its great sweat-colored wings, in a movement that certainly was a shrug. Then it settled and slept. Talons, fangs, blades, it slept. AM appeared to us as the burning bush and said we could kill the hurricane bird if we wanted to eat. We had not eaten in a very long time, but even so, Gorster merely shrugged. Benny had begun to shiver and he drooled. Ellen held him. "Ted, I'm hungry," she said. I smiled at her. I was trying to be reassuring, but it was as phony as Nimdok's bravado. "Give us weapons," he demanded. The burning bush vanished and there were two crude sets of bows and arrows, and a water pistol lying on the cold deck plates. I picked up a set, useless. Nimdok swallowed heavily. We turned and started the long way back. The hurricane bird had blown us out. About for a length of time we could not conceive. Most of that time we had been unconscious, but we had not eaten. A month on the march to the bird itself without food. Now how much longer to find our way to the ice caverns and the promised canned goods? None of us cared to think about it. We could not die. We would be given filth and scum to eat. Of one kind or another. Or nothing at all. AM would keep our bodies alive somehow. In pain, in agony. The bird slept back there for how long it didn't matter. When AM was tired of its being here, it would vanish. But all that meat, all that tender meat as we walked, the lunatic laugh of a fat woman rang high and around us in the computer chambers that led endlessly nowhere. It was not Ellen's laugh. She was not fat. And I had heard her laugh for 109 years. In fact, I had not heard. We walked. I was hungry. We moved slowly. There was often fainting and we would have to wait. One day he decided to cause an earthquake, at the same time rooting for us to spot with nails through the soles of our shoes. Ellen and Nimdok were both caught when a fissure shot its lightning bolt opening across the floor plates. They disappeared and were gone. When the earthquake was over, we continued on our way. Benny, Gorrister, and myself. Ellen and Nimdok were returned to us later that night, which abruptly became a day, as the Heavenly Legion bore them to us with a celestial chorus singing, "Go down, Moses." The archangels circled several times and then dropped to the hideously mangled bodies. We kept walking, and a while later, Ellen and Nimdok fell in behind us. They were no worse for wear, but Now, Ellen walked with a limp. AM had left her that. It was a long trip to the ice caverns to find the canned food. Ellen kept talking about the Bing cherries and the Hawaiian fruit cocktail. I tried not to think about it. The hunger was something that had come to life, even as AM had come to life. There is no way to describe the pains that not having eaten for months brought us, and yet we were kept alive. The stomachs that were merely cauldrons of acid, bubbling, foaming, and always shooting spears of silver-thin pain into our chests. It was the pain of a terminal ulcer, terminal cancer, terminal paresis. It was an unending pain, and we passed through the cavern of rats, and we passed through the path of boiling steam, and we passed through the country of the blind, and we passed through the slough of despond. And we passed through the valley of tears, and we came finally to the ice caverns. Horizonless thousands of miles, in which the ice had formed in blue and silver flashes where novas lived in the glass. The down-dropping stalactites as thick and glorious as diamonds that had been made to run like jelly when solidified in a graceful eternities of smooth, sharp perfection. We saw the stack of canned foods, and we tried to run with them. We fell in the snow and we got up and went on. Benny shoved us away and went at them and pawed them and gummed them and gnawed at them, and he could not open them. AM had not given us a tool to open the cans. Benny grabbed a quart can. Benny grabbed a 3-quart can of guava shells and began to batter it against the ice bank. The ice flew and shattered, but the can was merely dented. While we heard the laughter of a fat lady high overhead and echoing down and down and down the tundra, Benny went completely mad with rage. He began throwing cans and all. As we all scrabbled about in the snow and ice trying to find a way to end the helpless agony of frustration, there was no way. Then, Benny's mouth began to drool and he flung himself on Gorrister. In that instant I felt terribly calm, surrounded by madness, surrounded by hunger, surrounded by everything but death. I knew death was our only way out. AM had kept us alive, but there was a way to defeat him. Not total defeat, but at least peace. I would settle for that. I had to do it quickly. Benny was eating Gorrister's face, Gorrister on his side, thrashing snow. Benny wrapped around him with powerful monkey legs crushing Gorrister's waist. His hands locked around Gorrister's head like a nutcracker, and his mouth ripping at the tender skin of Gorrister's cheek. Gorrister screamed with such jagged-edged violence that stalactites fell. They plunged down softly erect in the receiving snowdrifts, spears, hundreds of them, everywhere, protruding from the snow. Benny's head pulled back sharply as something gave all at once, and a bleeding raw white dripping of flesh hung from his teeth. Ellen's face, black against the white snow, dominoes of chalk dust, Nimdoc with no expression but eyes, all eyes. Gorrister half-conscious, Benny now an animal. I knew AM would let him play. Gorrister would not die, but Benny would fill his stomach. I turned half to my right and drew a huge ice spear from the snow. All in that instant I drove the great ice point ahead of me, like a battering ram. Braced against my right thigh, it struck Benny on the right side just under the ribcage, and I drove upward through his stomach and broke inside him. He pinched forward and lay still. Gorrister lay on his back. I pulled another spear free and straddled him, still moving, driving the spear straight down through his throat. His eyes closed as the cold penetrated. Ellen must have realized what I had decided, even as fear gripped her. She ran at Nimdoc with a short icicle as she screamed into his mouth, and the force of her rush did the job. His head jerked sharply as if it had been nailed to the snow crust behind him. All in an instant there was an eternity, beat of soundless anticipation. I could hear AM draw in his breath. His toys had been taken from him. 3 of them were dead, could not be revived. He could keep us alive by his strength and talent, but he was not God. He could not bring them back. Ellen looked at me, her ebony features stark against the snow that surrounded us. There was a fear and pleading in her manner, the way she held herself ready. I knew we had only a heartbeat before AM would stop us. It struck her and she folded toward me, bleeding from the mouth. I could not read meaning into her expression. The pain had been too great, had contorted her face, but it might have been thank you. It's possible. Please. Some hundreds of years have passed. I don't know. AM has been having fun for some time, accelerating and retarding my time since. I will say the word now. It took me 10 months to say I don't know. I think it has been some hundreds of years. He was furious. He wouldn't let me bury them. It didn't matter. There was no way to dig up the deck plates. He dried up the snow. He brought the night. He roared and sent locusts. It didn't do a thing. They stayed dead. I'd had him. He was furious. I had thought AM hated me before. I was wrong. It was not even a shadow of hate. He now slavered from every printed circuit. He made certain I would suffer eternally and could not do myself in. He left my mind intact. I can dream. I can wonder. I can lament. I remember all 4 of them. I wish... Well, it doesn't make any sense. I know I saved them. I know I saved them from what has been happening to me. But still, I cannot forget killing them. Ellen's face, it isn't easy. Sometimes I want to. It doesn't matter. Ellen, AM has altered me. For his own peace of mind, I suppose. He doesn't want me to run at a full speed into a computer bank and smash my skull. Or hold my breath till I faint. Or cut my throat on a rusted sheet of metal. There are reflective surfaces down there. I will describe myself as I see myself. I am a great soft jelly thing, smoothly rounded with no mouth, with pulsing white holes filled by fog where my eyes used to be. Rubbery appendages that were once my arms. Bulk, rounding down into legless humps of soft, slippery matter. I leave a moist trail when I move. Blotches of diseased, evil gray come and go on my surface as though light is being beamed from within. Outwardly, dumbly, I shamble about, a thing that could never have been known as human, a thing whose shape is so alien, a travesty that humanity becomes more obscene for the vague resemblance, inwardly alone here, living under the land, under the sea, in the belly of AM, whom we created because our time was badly spent and we must have known unconsciously that he could do it better. At least the 4 of them are safe at last. AM will be all the matter for that. It makes me a little happier, and yet AM has won. Simply, he has taken revenge. I have no mouth, and I must scream.